Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, and I have had so many people come into the store this week facing the challenge of European starlings flooding their backyard feeders and devouring everything. So, I like my customers to understand that it is very hard just to feed one species or a subset of wildlife species, and that there's really no silver bullet solutions to this problem. But I thought I would do some research, kind of think about what works well in my own backyard feeding systems, and try to come up with some ideas to help lessen the burden of European starlings at your backyard feeders. So, starlings are aggressive towards other species. They travel in large flocks and they do consume a lot of food and they poop all over the place. Um, it is an invasive species in North America. It was released in Central Park in New York way back in the 1890s. And they do compete with our native songbirds for food and cavity nesting sites. So, one thing you should know about European starlings is that they have a long, soft, pointy beak, and that is designed to help them eat insects and berries, grains, and small seeds. And some of their favorite foods include cracked corn, sunflower hearts and chips. They love suet, especially with seeds included or pieces of corn or peanuts. They'll eat shelled peanuts. They seem to go crazy for mealworms. Um, and they will also eat smaller seeds like millet and milo. They'll also eat bread, oats, and other human foods discarded on the ground. I like this graphic from the Audubon's Guide to Birdseed because it shows what some of these different birdseed components look like. So we can avoid overly feeding them and attracting them by using high quality mixes or changing the food that we're offering for a while, and then placing that food where it's hard for them to reach. You can also completely remove your feeders for a few days up to a couple of weeks. This can be especially helpful during peak migratory periods in the spring and the fall. Right now, in the deeper winter months, these birds are just hanging around, and I'm not sure that would make a huge difference. You can try, but then the downside to that is that you don't have food out during a critical time to help supplement your native wild songbird diet. So rather than pulling down your feeders, you can remember that starlings have softer bills than other seed eaters and switch up the types of foods that you are offering, like offering peanuts in the shell that are very hard for them to break open, offering white striped sunflower seed, and black oil sunflower seed. They can get into those, but it's harder and they much prefer the shelled hearts or chips. So maybe dial back or change how you're offering those. And also, safflower has a very hard shell. Safflower has the added benefit that it's a bitter seed that squirrels and other mammals tend to avoid, and it's loved by our northern cardinals, our downy woodpeckers, chickadees, all sorts of other songbirds will eat the safflower. So that's something that you might be able to offer that the European starlings will avoid. So you can also feed Niger seed, also sometimes called thistle. It is a less preferred food than sunflower seeds as well. And how you feed the Niger matters. Placing it in vertical tube feeders will help. It's more difficult for the starlings to hold on and be able to eat a lot. So the metal screen feeders without perches where they have to cling on, or other tube feeders with small perches that it's just really hard for the starlings to get comfortable and eat a lot. Because European starlings tend to feed in large flocks, often on the ground, it's helpful to be careful what you put in feeders, like hopper feeders with large trays. That might be a better one to put the striped sunflower or black oil sunflower in, or you might have to remove it altogether depending on how much pressure there is at your feeding station. And keep as much food off of the ground as you can. So maybe put little trays on your tube feeders to catch spills. If you make those trays too big, though, they then become perching surfaces for the starlings. Um, but it helps if you're feeding livestock their grain inside, so you're not spilling where the starlings can get to that. Use and cover garbage cans or other access to human food, and definitely don't throw that food on the ground or pavement where the birds can gather in flocks and feed. The trade off to keeping birdseed off of the ground is that species like juncos and a lot of our native sparrow species prefer to feed there, and so you will have less support of those species while trying to deter the European starling. Now let's talk about suet. They love it, they will sit and they will eat a lot of it at once. So there's some different strategies around how you feed your suet. If you're using the large cages like the one on the left, that's pretty easy for them to sit on. You can cut your pieces of suet down into thirds and just feed a little bit at the bottom of the cage. Our clingers, like our woodpeckers, um, can easily get to that suet at the bottom. You can see here the starlings have a little bit harder time hanging on and getting to that suet lower in the cage. You can also try upside down suet feeders. This is an example of one that holds a single cake made by Irva, and this one is an upside down suet feeder that holds two cakes made by Bird's Choice. So they can still hang on. It just makes it uncomfortable for them, and they can't eat as much, feed as comfortably as our native songbirds can. I found some really good advice out there about avoiding perches near these upside down suet feeders that will offer them an easy jump to get to them. So think about the flat top baffles. If you have a pole mounted system, you can cover those with a steep sided cone to not let them have like a launching place to get to those upside down feeders, or you can move the feeders lower so that it's more of a horizontal jump from that flat surface or some other nearby perch. Or you could use a dome top baffle, but basically minimizing easy launching places for them. And European starlings also don't like to go under covers, and so you might be able to reorient a big cage feeder like that under a dome, either a weather guard or a dome shaped hanging squirrel baffle, to make it harder for them to get up underneath to get that suet. You could also use, with a similar idea, dome shaped feeders where that dome is adjustable and you can lower it down to make it very uncomfortable for the starlings to get in, but the little clinger, our little songbirds, can still fit and get under that cover into the tray. So this Cutest Chickadee Feeder by Droll Yankee is an example, as is the Droll Yankee Seed Saver domed tray feeder. Both of those have adjustable height domes that you can scrunch down and make uncomfortable for the starlings. I also like vertical suet feeders. I think European starlings are pretty awkward about getting on and using these. Certainly they can. You can see this one is clinging on and tail propping, but usually there's a lot of fluttering. It's not comfortable for them to hang on, and they can't eat as much as other suet feeder setups where they can sit comfortably. And if you don't have larger feeders like this, then species like pileated woodpeckers are less likely to come to your feeding stations. So I do really love this vertical feeder. This one's by bird choice and holds two standard suet cakes. Definitely our native woodpeckers love this type of vertical feeder with the paddle. They're very comfortable tail propping. This red-bellied woodpecker did not have a problem fending off the incoming starling, and they're just very comfortable on this type of feeder. To me, it's worth sacrificing a little bit of suet to some starlings to keep these particular native wild birds happy. You can also make it difficult for starlings to access small food offerings like these. I think these are the Ollie, the owl, Mr. Bird seed ornaments, as an example, window mounted. So this American tree sparrow and downy woodpecker are perfectly happy, very good at hanging on to the small surface area and eating the seed. So there's another idea for offering food that the starlings can't get to. One of my absolute favorite ways to keep starlings out of the food I'm trying to offer is by using the starling-proof barrier guard feeders manufactured in the USA by Irva. So these barrier guard feeders are set up with an 1.5 by 1.5 square grid system. They are sized so that the central food offered cannot be reached by the starlings. Now they might be able to reach their head in and grab any like little crumb along the edge, but they can't get into the main food source. So this is what I ended up turning to for offering small suet nuggets and dried mealworms to my eastern bluebirds. I just was so sick and tired of the starlings coming in and wiping out the mealworms. Um, and I found I give my bluebirds a lot of credit that they kind of held their ground and will continue to use the barrier guard feeder even in the face of a flock of European starlings. They can squeeze in that 1.5 inch square entrance, and the starlings cannot. So these barrier guard feeders can be set up with a cup for mealworms. There's a screen available. You can see that here where I have peanut splits, another food that the starlings like. But you could also use that for feeding sunflower hearts or black oil sunflower if you're having large flock issues with starlings. There's also a version that holds two standard suet cakes, or you could put small seed cakes in there as well. And they have a seed cylinder version. And all of those are interchangeable. You could swap basically barrier guard feeder type very easily by changing those internal components. So that's one of my favorite ways to physically restrict European starlings from certain food. I'm also really liking the preformed seed cylinders or seed logs because they're laid out so vertically. I'm I'm finding that while the European starlings can land, it takes a long time for them to get anything off of there. They're pretty awkward about hanging on, and so I think these are a good way to distract the European starlings without them getting too much food. I also really like the way the safflower seed cylinders are performing. Lots of my other songbirds are enjoying them, and I am not seeing the starlings impact this particular kind of seed cylinder very much at all. So I think the hard shell combined with that vertical seed cylinder structure, making it hard for them to hang on, seems like a good way to feed our native songbirds and not the starlings. I also think that adjustable weight sensitive feeders like Brome's Squirrel Buster line with those limited perches and the weight or tension adjustment that's available with those can be helpful with large numbers of European starlings. Obviously, one or two might be able to land on these feeders, and it is a little bit of trial and error. You might have to tweak the tension to get it to where if multiple starlings land, it's sensitive enough to close down that shroud and block off the food. So I don't think it's as good as the caged Erva barrier guard feeders at physically restricting the birds by size, but I think feeders like this Brome Squirrel Buster Plus that has the weather guard mounted on it and the cardinal ring offers um, perching places for birds like cardinals that are sensitive about that, the opportunity to offer sunflower hearts or black oil sunflower to our songbirds. And I think that the weight sensitivity and the weather guard making it hard for the starlings to get up underneath to access might be ways to still offer those seeds and minimize the number of starlings that can feed on that type of food. Another important consideration in minimizing their impact on your backyard feeders is to eliminate places where they can roost overnight. Whether that's nest boxes that you've left up, winter roost boxes you have out, or even purple martin housing. It's important that the nest boxes you have up, you keep an eye on them. It's great to have the entrances at 1.5 inches or less because starlings need an entrance of 1 inch and 9/16 at minimum to be able to fit. So you can, not have to monitor so closely or worry about it if you have smaller nest boxes up. And you can, for purple martin housing, often there are door screens or plugs that you can use to block the entrances when martins are not in your area, or house covers that can be placed over those, or you can just take the gourds down during the winter months. For larger owl and wood duck and woodpecker and kestrel boxes that need to have those larger openings to allow those birds access, and starlings are known to take over during the nesting season, in particular take over those types of boxes. I was reading that you can place a small mirror on the back wall facing the entrance, and the starlings end up getting scared by their own reflection in that mirror. And so that'll help prevent them from usurping nest boxes from some of our larger native species. That mirror placement doesn't seem to deter our native birds from using those larger boxes. Probably something you want to implement ahead of nesting season so it's there from the very beginning. You should also look at sealing up holes around your house or other buildings like vents. Put screens or vent covers over those to deter them from getting in there. And just make sure you're monitoring your nest boxes and removing eggs and nests. This is a non-native invasive species and it is not protected by the Migratory Bird and Treaty Act. So by preventing it from reproducing, you are minimizing the pressures on your feeders and competition with our cavity nesting native birds. And I know starlings eat a lot, they make a mess, and they bully other birds. I sometimes find solace in the fact that they can provide prey items for our native raptors. So thank you, Mike Nelson, for this picture and reminding me of that. And I think, considering it at the landscape level, we can think about the fact that European starlings typically live around people and they use mowed lawns and city streets and agricultural fields for feeding in those large flocks. They tend to avoid large unbroken stretches of forest and chaparral and desert. So keeping our native ecosystems intact, um, keeping our livestock kind of fed inside, our garbage covered and not throwing food waste out where they can access it, and having less lawn and more native vegetation gives them fewer places to feed in those large raucous flocks. So I humbly offer up these ideas to help you deal with European starlings. Just want to reiterate, you won't be able to stop feeding them completely unless you pull down all of your feeders, but I hope these ideas help minimize their impact on your backyard feeding stations. Take care and good luck.